So one quick recap for everybody's benefit. Hello, Mr. Kamaraju. Hi. Hello, Viraj. I think what Aparna also sent the latest yesterday is that we'll go directly into the core question, which where I will invite each of you to go a little deeper into how in your context you've looked at decentralized data. And within that, you can talk about the first sub question. So we'll go right into, we'll not do one round of initial opening remarks and then the deeper question. Since some of that has got covered in the previous sessions, we'll go into, so I'll first invite Rahul, to talk about the initiatives at the Smart Cities Mission, and then directly with you, Dr. Girija, on how you've looked at decentralized data use on maternal and child health. And within that itself, you could incorporate the broader structural ways in which you've looked at it. If something is left out, we will come back to it during the next round or during the Q&A. I hope that's fine and comfortable for everyone. Dr. Girija, is that fine?
You're mute.
Dr. Girija is not audible. I think you may be on mute. I think Girija ma'am is on mute.
The audio is not, she says she's not on mute, but we can't.
No, she's not on mute. I think the earpiece, while the test check also, the earpiece, ma'am, if you can take it out.
Can you hear me now? I've taken out the earpiece.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
But I can't hear any of you. That's the problem. Once I take out the earpiece, I can't hear any of you. Let me check what's wrong with it.
Can you hear us now?
Very mildly. I don't know. Last time also we had this problem, then it rectified itself.
Ma'am, can you try increasing your PC speaker volume?
I'm increasing everything. See whether anything works. Can you hear me now? Is it better?
Yes, ma'am. We are able to hear you, ma'am.
Okay, can you hear? Can you hear me, Aparna?
Yes.
Aparna, I think we can start now.
Shall I go ahead, Kunjal? Participants are on. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. And I would like to welcome everybody on behalf of JPAL South Asia, CLEAR and DMEO teams to the National Conference on Monitoring, Evaluation and Learning 2022. We've been engaged with. Is there an echo? Shall I continue?
No, you're audible. You can continue.
Great. Thank you. So my name is Aparna Krishnan, and I'm a project director at JPAL South Asia, and I lead an initiative that works with governments and non-government partners to use existing administrative data better for policy research and decision making. So we have a long-standing partnership with DMEO at Niti Aayog, and we're very happy to be co-organizing this important session with them at the conference this year. So as some of you would already know, if you've attended the morning session, this is the third session of the day, and it is focused on discussions around creating robust data systems and processes to enable data use for decentralized decision-making across all levels of government. We're very fortunate to have with us today experts from both within and outside the government with extensive experience and knowledge of working with data to improve policy-making processes. I would like to introduce each of them right now. So first of all, Dr. Purnima Dore, who will be moderating the panel discussion today. She is, yes, Dr. Purnima Dore is a Tata Administrative Services leader, and she is currently the Director of Analysis, Insights and Impact at the Tata Trusts. She's been recognized as one of the top 100 analytics leaders in South Asia, and has served on a number of government committees and ministerial working groups, most recently on the National Consumption Expenditure Survey Aspirational Districts of India and the Data Smart Cities. Thank you very much, Dr. Purnima, for
Sorry, Aparna, to interrupt. We are not able to hear you properly. Maybe you can switch off your video and then start speaking.
इसने मेरा लास्ट ईयर इंटरव्यू लिया था विराज त्यागी ये मेरे साथ एनआईजी के अंदर था रामाराजू में इससे मैं मिला था वो बेटा मोटू
ये कौन है
इसने लिया था
तो त्यागी एक सेकंड ढोर पूर्णिमा डोरे क्या होता है
All right, sorry about that. I think there is an interesting panel discussion ongoing, but I hope this volume is clear now. Okay. I can't hear anyone else now, but
yes, Aparna, you're good.
Perfect. Sorry about that. So I was just moving on to introducing Dr. Gary Javatinathan. She's been a career civil servant who joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1981 and has served as the Chief Secretary of the Tamil Nadu government just prior to her retirement. She has wide experience overseeing the implementation and financing of schemes in the development sector, particularly health, nutrition, education, and other key portfolio departments within the government, and has also been the project coordinator for the World Bank funded Tamil Nadu Integrated Nutrition Project. She is also a researcher with a PhD in health economics and has been involved in several evaluation and research studies and is presently associated with IIT Madras as Professor of Practice. Thank you for joining us today, ma'am. Shri Rahul Kapoor is presently Director of the Smart Cities Mission in the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. He oversees several operational issues related to the implementation of Smart City Mission projects and has been involved in the program design of several new initiatives at the ministry related to innovation, capacity building, standardization, livability, and governance of smart cities. Thank you, sir, for joining. Shri Ramakamaraju is Head of Voluntary Action Cell and of Data and Strategy at the Aspirational Districts Program at Niti Aayog. He has been with the government for the last 17 years, implementing mission mode e-governance projects for the Government of India. At Niti, he is in charge of a number of projects at the intersection of technology and social policy. Before working in the Government of India, he has held several roles for the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and the Andhra Pradesh State Public Services. Thank you, sir, for joining. Finally, Shri Viraj Tyagi. Viraj is the CEO of eGov Foundation. He's passionate about the impact of a jugalbandi of public digital platforms, policies, and ecosystem in solving societal problems at scale and speed. Prior to joining the impact sector, Viraj was an entrepreneur and a corporate leader with experience in building large businesses in Europe and India. He has founded and serves on the board of several startups and companies in the country. A very warm welcome to all our speakers. So with that, today, to give you a flavor of what we can expect in the discussions in this panel discussion today, we hope to delve deeper into some of the themes that were highlighted in the opening session of the conference today. Particularly, we will focus on understanding challenges and solutions for enabling the use of data for decentralized decision-making in India. what we hope to do is to move the conversation from the benefits of adopting tech to improve data collection for better M&E to the potential for its systematic as well as sustained use of insights generated from such data in policymaking and decision-making processes. Many of you would have heard the opening remarks by the panelists in the first session, where there was a lot of discussion on the need to include the lowest levels of government. Mrs. Vinny Mahajan talked about individuals and communities, and their needs to be considered both while designing schemes as well as designing monitoring and evaluation systems. Similarly, Mr. Nageshwaran, the Chief Economic Advisor, highlighted with an interesting example how innovative solutions could be developed with robust and real-time access to data from the field. So therefore, in this session, we will aim to understand how data generated from the field can actually be shared back to the field at subnational levels, right from the village level, block, district to the state. So two of our speakers you will see today will be able to highlight their experience from state and local government perspectives on both challenges faced as well as some lessons and best practices from their experience in working with health data systems as well as municipal services. We will also see from this panel and hear about efforts initiated at the central government level for robust and standardized data collection at the level of cities and districts, both through the Smart Cities program and the Aspirational Districts programs. And hear more about what can be done further to enable data-driven governance at local levels of governance. And finally, an important theme underlying not just this session, but also the entire conference is about the importance of capacity building for sustaining and replicating successes of data-driven governance at local levels of government, and what should be done and what can be done to build capacity and capabilities of both staff as well as systems and processes at every level. Before we move on, a quick check on the logistics to keep in mind. So you will see that you can post your questions on the Q&A section. Our teams will be monitoring the questions and will share them with the moderator so that they can be collated and asked during the Q&A section. So please include your name and institutional affiliation. And if you would like your question to be addressed to a particular panelist, you may feel free to mention that as well. Next, and a quick tip for those of you joining WebEx through your phone app, there is an equal or a focus layout, which may help with better viewing experience. Thank you. With this, I'd like to mention a couple of concepts and principles to keep in mind before we hand over to Dr. Purnima to start the panel discussion. And this is to ensure a shared understanding of some of the thinking that has been going on amidst us for thinking about decentralized decision making as well as decentralized use of data. So next slide, please. There's a bit of a lag, but I can start talking about it. So as all of us are aware, there have been many initiatives. You can animate the, yes, thank you. There have been many initiatives of late that have dramatically increased the availability and accessibility of particularly high quality administrative data. And these are through efforts such as data.gov.in, where there has been a push to making data open and transparent. And we've also seen over the years that the quality as well as the nature of sectors and the types of data being covered have increased dramatically. Next, and you can animate the full slide. There are two more. Thank you. Further, more recently, through DMEO as well as Niti Aayog efforts, initiatives such as the Data Governance Quality Index and the Output Outcome Monitoring Frameworks are being adopted widely across both national and state levels. And this has improved the linkage from data collection to how it can be used. So shifting the focus a little bit more to monitoring and outcomes and feeding back into the policymaking processes. Finally, we're also happy to see with GovTech 3.0 a shift to a more ecosystem thinking, moving away from just systems level to much more ecosystems and stakeholders, thinking about data access policies, data use policies. Many of these guidelines and policies are underway presently, and we hope that that would help provide a lot more clarity and guidance to how data can be not just stored and accessed within government, but also externally with researchers and other collaborators who can feed back into the policymaking processes. So with these, we hope to see an era of systemic reforms to accelerate digitization and the use of data. Next slide, please. I also see perhaps is the audio okay? I'm getting some feedback saying it's breaking up. Okay. I'll try and speak a bit slower. Right. So you can move to the next slide. I think the main point we'd like to make and encourage the panel to speak about today is to reflect both on challenges faced in their journeys for better data quality collection, but also what further needs to be done, what are some constraints, and are there some examples and best practices in how data can actually be used. And when we talk about use, we're saying going from reporting and monitoring, and we heard a lot again earlier today about ranking and about monitoring. But what about evaluations and what about forward planning and targeting? So when we talk about decision making, it goes through the entire life cycle from design of schemes, monitoring for quick course corrections in implementation, reallocation of resources, replication and scale up of successful initiatives. You can move to the next slide, please. And you can also animate this fully. Yes. So you'll see the cycle currently. While there are subjects divided between the center and the state, we see the central government taking a promising lead in designing very good, robust data collection systems and also setting the policy at the policy level, setting the design guidelines for many of these schemes and programs. And we've seen a lot of this across sectors in health, sanitation, education, and across the board. So, and if you animate one more, you'll see that the state and local governments are involved primarily in both implementing of these programs, but also collecting the data that is generated to capture the outcomes and the outputs from such programs and decisions. And what we'd like to motivate this group to think about, if you can move to the next slide, please, is from this framework of consulting levels of governments to much more collaboration. Next slide, please. Exactly. So if you see what happens is that what we're suggesting, what are some ways in which central, state, and local governments could collaborate towards this mandate of data-driven decision-making right from the lowest levels of government to the national levels of government. So in some ways, shifting a number of the decision-making around implementation and course correction closer to the field. So the districts are the unit that are in charge of allocating the program resources and in direct implementation. If they have access to data at that granular level, at the district level and the sub-district level, it could potentially inform quicker actions and reactions at the district level itself. Earlier through the session, as well as in other discussions, we know that timeliness of data is an important aspect. And so with the adoption of technology, which has enabled simultaneous collection of data along with delivery of government services, the potential to actually access real-time data has increased dramatically. So, but however, we have not seen as much use of that data. So this is to highlight how could we think about making that data accessible back to the implementing levels of government and also feeding it back to higher up within the government for policy level changes. Next and final slide, please. Right. So you can animate the whole slide. So I just want to take a quick minute to say that we saw all this coming together during the COVID-19 pandemic. And in a time of crisis, we see that the systems came together, data came together. So we see a lot of systems and data coming together for the COVID-19 pandemic. And we were able to see cities and districts, particularly Mumbai, for example, which was able to use disaggregated data up to the ward level and set in place policies and practices that enabled triangulation quickly and much quicker response to manage what was otherwise a very highly densely populated city. And as we also had a number of among the largest number of COVID-19 infections. So this kind of mechanism, which was possible at a point in time, should also be replicable to other sectors. So this is something that we would like to see. Can we have more such examples? What needs to be done to sustain this at time? The last slide, please, before I hand over. So just a quick note to say that we are working with DMEO to collectively develop a number of resources that can be used by ministries at the central level and departments at the state level. These include white papers, advisory notes, and capacity building content for both generating good quality data, but more importantly, how that data can be used for different levels of decisions at different levels of government. So we would be happy to engage further, both through the Q&A as well as beyond, to see others who would like to engage with us in this process. So with this, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Purnima Dore to start off the panel discussion with the members, and also encourage the audience to keep writing in their questions through the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Aparna, for a very nice overview. And I think what we're here to discuss today is on the decentralization of data as well as data use. And I'm a firm believer that this decade is going to be very definitive in terms of how data and technology can be used by us and also what it can do to us. And so it's great to have with us a set of people who are not just going to talk about what it means, but they're also the doers. I think in this panel, what we have together are folks who have been doing it, who have been figuring it out, finding out what works, what doesn't, retracing certain steps. And a few things that, if one had to contextualize it for our, our wider audience, I would also say that industry has used data in such a big way and looked at its decentralization very meaningfully. And they have largely used the 4P framework, right, where you're looking at product, placement, pricing, promotion. The 4Ps, the way it works for our kind of sector, I'd like to, probably, outline it as profiling, understanding where the community is going and what is it that we need to design and develop. Prioritization, which I think since the morning, a lot of key decision makers, right from smart cities, aspirational districts, DMEO, have been talking about this whole thing of prioritization as well as fiscal planning. Programs, what goes into our programs, how we define them from point zero. And finally, progress. How are we measuring this quantitatively, qualitatively? So I'd welcome all of our panelists today, and first invite each of them to share in about 5-6 minutes in their own context how they have been going about some of this and where they see some of the cutting edge work as well as some of the challenges. We'll go first with Mr. Rahul Kapoor. I've had the opportunity of meeting him first a few years back at the Smart Cities Apex conference. And thereafter, we've been in touch on the Data Smart Cities program, which he has been leading very ably and, working across what the center can do along with all the smart cities to develop a culture of data across the board. So my first question would be to you, Mr. Rahul, and to walk us through a little bit about what are, from your experiences of the initiatives and strategies used by the Smart Cities mission, how has the progress on the open data conversation been? How have they enabled better generation and collation of data from the cities? And what are possibly some of the challenges being faced around data capabilities, and what are you thinking about to address these? So over to you, Mr.
Thank you so much, Dr. Purnima. And of course, we have been working for the last 2 years, and you would have appreciated the kind of progress that the cities have made. I mean, starting from 2015, when the mission was announced, and with the advent of technology, with a lot of infrastructure projects around ICTs getting implemented in the smart cities, and the amount of data that was getting generated and churned. Now, the whole thought was that how do you use this data for better, effective planning, decision making, and all this talk that must have happened in the first half of the day on evidence-based planning and decision making, creating robust data ecosystems. That was the thought that we also had, that all this data that is coming has to be utilized in a more effective manner, especially for evidence-based planning. And accordingly, the Data Smart Cities strategy was rolled out in 2019. The tenets were 3. Basically, if you focus on the 3 Ps of people, that means get the right set of people in the cities. Now, starting with 0 city data officers, when we started the mission, to today with all 100 smart cities having a city data officer, and along with them, a team who can help and assist the city data officers to work towards building this data ecosystem. Working on the processes with regard to how you have to basically collect data, how do you basically do the quality checks, the processes around data security, privacy, and all those issues that came around with data getting generated and data getting stored. Now, those processes needed to be streamlined. So we talked about having a city data policy. And when we started the mission, none of the cities had a city data policy. But accordingly, they all started working towards creation of a city data policy for themselves. And the guidelines that we framed in the ministry with the help of our partners, the smart cities guidelines for hackathons, for creating a city data policy for themselves. Now that has led to penetration down in the field. And if you really look at it, the third P of platforms, that means creating, enabling public goods like the open data portal that the Smart Cities Mission created, or the India Urban Data Exchange, the urban learning platform that we have built, and the integrated assessment framework that we are trying to work on right now. Now, if you look at it, the idea was not every city or every state need to create their own public goods or data infrastructure. What we wanted to do was build this common denominator that cities could use and leverage. So starting with the open data portal, wherein we encourage cities to start sharing their basic minimal data that the ecosystem could use for co-creation and innovation. And today we have more than 5,000 resources on this open data portal. But that was not the end of it. The idea is like there's an evolutionary process starting with open data. You come to access control data, because today we are talking about high value data sets. And when you're talking about high value data sets, you also think about data monetization. So the natural evolution process would be to create a secured exchange layer, which is what we are trying to build through the India Urban Data Exchange platform, wherein you build standards for data exchange. We create a platform wherein you can catalog data, you can get access to that data, which people are reluctant to share. And therefore, you are able to create much more innovative products and much more innovative solutions for cities, because this trust factor comes in with the government promoted urban data exchange platform. Now, moving on. So we are doing a lot of assessments, and I am sure we talk about the assessment frameworks like the ease of living or the municipal performance index that is happening. And of course, the climate smart cities assessment framework, the Swachh Sarvekshan that happens. Cities get burdened with this collection of data exercises that keeps happening from time to time. We are trying to streamline that. So there has to be a better, more efficient way of data collection that we're trying to work on. So there has to be an integrated way of data collection, either through APIs, to data which is already existing. So we reduce this redundancy in the system. So we are working on an integrated collection process wherein we would like to create sectoral data lakes or data spaces. And from those data spaces, you should be able to come out with any kind of framework that you want to create that can help generate evidence for your sector. So let us say if you want to create a mobility framework, you should be able to do that. And that is the kind of framework we're trying to work on. There is work on e-governance platforms, which I'm sure Viraj would probably be talking about with the work that we're doing with him in the ministry. And several such initiatives are there. So of course, there have been challenges with regard to the capacity, and wherein we have got good partners. We have done capacity building programs with Tata Trusts for the 100 CDOs. And slowly, we are trying to bring in the right kind of maturity through a data maturity assessment framework that we have come up with that tries to ask the right kind of question to implement the data smart city strategy. So with that, I will just close here, and we'll take the discussion forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kapoor. And I think I must say that the Mahua has been one of the ministries which has, I think, as you've outlined about capacities, about, creating partnerships with across private sector, across academia, and consistently trying to, build frameworks which the cities can also ride on. I think it's a very interesting example of what is happening at the center and what is happening at the cities, and trying to bridge the two with having a dedicated unit also focused on data within Mahua, which is the DAMU. And I think it's one of the first of its kind, which, there may be a lot of learnings for other ministries also, which are keen to walk through this data journey. Thank you so much, Mr. Kapoor. We'll move on to Dr. Girija. And I would invite Dr. Girija to share with us some of these. So Dr. Girija comes in with the state perspective. She's a career civil servant, retired as chief secretary, and is currently also teaching at IIT Madras as a professor of practice. What, according to you, Doctor, are the key constraints at various levels which inhibit decentralized data use? And how have you tried to, address this through some of the experiences within Tamil Nadu, particularly in the area of maternal and child care? So over to you. Please do share with us both from a structural and a process approach. What is it that you have tried to do? And what do you think has worked? What in hindsight do you think, would need to be done differently? And are there things that other departments and states can learn from? Dr. Girija, you're not audible to me.
I am trying to talk as loudly as
Yes.
possible. I don't know what's happening.
Perfect. This
Can
is
you hear
perfect
me?
now. Please go on. Yes.
Okay. Okay. I have no idea why this happens from time to time. Just reminds us of our own technical lack of expertise. Anyway, hearing Rahul talk just now, it sounded for me such a positive experience. So what I'm going to share with you, and though Purnima has put it in perspective by saying, tell me about the things that you did that you feel happy about. I must say I am 2 years out of service. That means I retired 2 years ago. I spent nearly 30 years. My first meeting, I always say when I entered service, was an HMIS meeting when I joined the health department. When I retired from the health department, I was still grappling with the same old, even the initials had not changed. Aparna will know how much I still was working with the same 4 initials, HMIS. So my story is not as happy a one to tell, but what we realized with, I think, data collection and collation, the country and the health sector, the public health sector, have been doing extremely well. If you look at databases per se, I would say health databases are some of the strongest in the world. And I would even say they are quite robust. I mean, I would not say that they're collected well, and we've gone through many iterations of how they should be collected. But when you come to the second part of this, that is the decentralization and the decision making, I think Aparna correctly pointed out that COVID-19, which was not a planned thing, and was really something we don't want repeated, was one experience where the health department and many other sectors joined together and were able to use data generated in a more open fashion, and data which was, the data cycle was shorter, the decision making was faster, and we were able to do it. And we've had similar experiences when I think, again, we are all very good to act in a crisis. But I want to talk about, as you said, the maternal and child health databases and the primary care databases, which I have been struggling with for a long time. And both these databases in this country are largely centrally mandated. And Aparna pointed that out when she said that the central government has done a great job of doing the designing of the database. But unfortunately or fortunately, these databases are designed for the people who create them. So this has been written in literature as what is called the conflict in institutional logic. I mean, it's a very fancy word. Purely means that the people who design it are not the same who either collect it or who use it. So this has been one of the major reasons why the HMIS or HMS or whatever it's called periodically, which we enter into NHM. Actually, we enter it at the institution level and then it goes right up to the top, is not really used very often for decision making. Now, in our state, we realized this because we already had some form of decision, we had some form of HMIS. So we have got a system by which we have a state portal. We get all the data into our state portal and then we push it into the central portal, which gives us more flexibility than other states. We are able to design our own reports. We are also able to give our district some amount of flexibility in using the data. But definitely from the design point of view, it is designed for the use of the NHM and the Health and Family Welfare Department. So this is what happens. And the problem is somewhat worse when we come to the maternal and child tracking services. This again, we had a 2008 database called Pick Me. We wanted everyone to pick the database. The central government came in as a late entrant, asked us to change our structure. We fought a mighty battle, basically because our database, which is a cohort for tracking pregnant women and children, was also tied up to 2 things. First, it was tied up to our maternal benefit scheme. That is, we made our payments on the maternal benefit scheme through our maternal tracking system. So we were able to persuade some well-intentioned bureaucrats in the ministry that, okay, we'll just give you the data you ask for and we won't be able to use your system, which turned out for the good in 2 ways. One, because the central government changed their database again. And so now they are on the RCH database. In the meanwhile, we have linked our database to the civil registration system. That is, we have linked it to birth and death. So our database has become more robust because every mother has to now register on this database to get a birth certificate. In the meanwhile, as I said, the central government has jumped 2 horses. We don't blame them. The second conflict, which I didn't want to mention, but which is also there, is very often databases are defined or designed for donors, for other requirements, for technical requirements. So they keep changing their face. Whereas at the state level, we were able to retain our own entity and we have been able to use this database. But while saying that, I must say even the state government is not really good at empowering the field level. We are happier at the state level because we can manipulate our data. But when we talk about giving it to our district collectors or even further down the line, we are as, what shall I say, we are still ostriches. And but the good news is when I see young people like you or Rahul or people, Viraj, people who are coming here, the young district collectors have come and fought with us to take data into their control. Recently, the Tirunelveli district collector, he has managed to create his own rating system for high-risk mothers out of this database after arguing with the health ministry that he needs the data more than them. And he has managed to put it in place and he's actually showing results. And so much so, we are now trying to take it and sell it to as an exemplar. But what I heard from Rahul is that why not we make this for everybody? Why not we encourage everybody to do this rather than waiting for someone with a louder voice to ask for us? So this is what's happened. And there's an extreme example on the technical conflict which comes up. This is IDSP. I don't know. I don't think anyone from here is in health, but those of you who are listening in, IDSP is the Integrated Disease Surveillance Program. This is an excellent program. It collects daily data on diseases, but we've never used it for any real disease surveillance. So let me stop with that. It just goes into some big black hole and it's probably used by someone for some excellent purpose, but not for anything decentralized or for any decision making. So that's why when we had to do dengue or we had to do COVID control, we had to create our own fresh database. So I think that's the point I wanted to make, that somewhere along the line, we need to relook. And that's why I'm happy to see that some ministries, also maybe the smart ministries or the ones who came in later with new projects, are looking at it differently. That is data as a common resource, not as something that is centralized in one platform and stored in one place so that you only get an analytical report once a quarter. I mean, that's what we are all now expecting. So somewhere we need to throw this open, even in the traditional old departments like health, education, and social welfare. These are the 3 departments I have some knowledge of. Health I've been interacting with closely. And that's not enough. We need to train the people below to talk about what you talked of, what Vinny talked of, talking about the real P's. The real P's are not just review and coming first in that. I mean, that causes a different degree of manipulation that we don't even want to discuss. What we want to see is that real programs are, as she said, in our war room for COVID, was using day-to-day data to manipulate how much oxygen should be sent to what place, or even what doctor should be deputed where. We want to see real data being used for real-time use. And for that, we need to do a lot of mindset change. Beside, at the first level, making data open, thinking of platforms like they talked in the smart city platform. The health department must also open up. They must also cut down their need for data at each level, depending on what they're actually using. See, as a researcher, I have found that, for instance, the health data comes in 2 buckets. One is the program data and the another is the survey data. Almost always it is impossible to compare the two. And I've struggled with PhD students also, making a big headway and then finding out that none of the indicators match. So ultimately, we end up using the survey data because those data are much more accessible. The NFHS, the NSSO have all made their raw data available, whereas none of the raw data in the program data is available even at the state level, unless, like our state, we create this mirror image portal. So I would request that we all, as this group, recommend, and with Niti Aayog at its head, DMEO, everyone, recommend for the same kind of work be done in the traditional departments as has been done in smart cities, and what we are going to hear from Viraj now, and even in aspirational districts, so that everyone can access raw data. Everyone is trained, I think, again and again, a lot of capacity building on what can be done with data. I did talk to, before this meeting, I talked to a few field level functionaries. They are quite closed on what they say. No, that is sent to Government of India, madam. We make our own Excel sheets. This was exactly what he told me. So I have nothing to say. He is still making his own Excel sheets. So let's hope for, I'm very positive when I come for such meetings. I'm always sure that progress can be made. And I see these new changes happening. And as you rightly said, this is the This is the time. And if we lose this opportunity, when we have so many, let's say, tools at our disposal, I think mindset has to change. And I think that will help, along with a lot of capacity building, will help health data become much more robust and become also much more useful into achieving the progress, the last P that you were talking in terms of better health for the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Girija. I think you've hit the nail on the head on some of the core issues, I think, facing us today. One being that a lot which gets collected never is visible to those who are collecting it or who have to actually do things on the ground. It goes up somewhere into somebody's Excel sheet or dashboard or report, but it's not feeding back. And probably that's the reason why there is a lot of skepticism down on the field, where they just feel that more and more MISs have to be collected, but towards what purpose? And until it's made available, and particularly I think the sectors you mentioned, health, education, social welfare, these are some of the big ticket ones for our country, where we need to show and need to work towards a lot of change. And I think on that note, I would invite Mr. Kamaraju to come in, since for the aspirational districts program, he's been looking at their data strategy. Nutrition, education, some of these indicators are top of mind there. The big question of, to what extent do we look at indicators as benchmarking and as a competition, and to what extent are we able to use it to have districts really reflect and plan their change stories and plan their work, their access to resources. So Mr. Kamaraju, please do come in here. It's I think we've had an interesting journey looking at working closely on the aspirational districts program of this interface of administrative data and survey data, and would love for you to share your learnings and observations around this experience so far. It's been a few years into the program. What more is planned to institutionalize the decentralized use of data for decision making as part of ADP, and are there lessons or reflections which can enable better data use by districts directly?
Thank you, Purnima. And at the outset, I would like to thank DMEO for organizing this national conference on the very, very important topic. So, coming straight to the topic of the day about the decentralized use of data. I think the aspirational districts program fits the bill, and it's the perfect example for the topic for the day. So how the concept of decentralized use of data and reuse of data, and based on the data that is being generated at the local level or subnational level is being used for effective decision making. All these tenets are are the best fit for the aspirational district program. So in this program, the first aspect that has been taken up for effective use of data is the empowerment of the district magistrate. This program, district magistrate is the focal or fulcrum for this program. What has been a challenge has been thrown to all these district magistrates and the district administration of the aspirational districts to show improvement and benchmark themselves as one of the state best districts within 3 years of the program, and subsequently as the national best districts across the socio-economic indicators in the 5 years of the program. So in the first 3 years of the program, as you all might have already gone through the budget speech, you might have listened to the Honorable Finance Minister, where it has been informed that all the aspirational districts have improved during the last 3 years from the critical indicators across the 5-6 thematic areas in the program. However, there are certain blocks within these aspirational districts where certain improvement is required across some indicators. Therefore, the focus next 2 years would be on the such blocks where still there is some development required to be done. So this is what is the perfect track or the sense where how are we able to say that the improvement has happened at a district level across 5 thematic areas, and at the same time we are also trying to figure out very clearly that within these improved districts across certain critical aspects, still there are certain portions or pockets which require still more improvement. So for the decentralized use of data, the first and foremost thing what we realize the learning is that you need to empower that particular subnational and local level authorities. Until unless you don't empower them, then the development process may not take the pace at which it is being taken now. Secondly, we need to, what we have learned in the system is that while the district administration is being given full empowerment and focus, at the same time, they have also been collaborated with the state and the national authorities as well. It's not as if that just they have been thrown into water and everybody else is supervising or monitoring them. It's a collective collaborative effort in improvement. So we have also the biggest challenge what we have seen at the beginning of the program is about the data collection, the data point of it. So first of all, how do we convince the district administration that socio-economic development across parameters means what exactly it involves? What are those critical aspects, critical indicators that the district has to focus upon? If shown improvement, what all other parameters also get improved. So this is the first step which we have taken, that we have clearly defined each of the tracking parameters or ranking parameters. We have made the documents, we have made it multilingual, we have created a self-paced training programs, because one of the biggest challenges at the subnational level is that there would be frequent transfers, frequent movement of resources across the districts. So in order to have a kind of continuity and these things we have created a modules of self-paced understanding of what an indicator means, how it is being defined, what are the counting rules, how it has to be taken care, and also provided the technology support to all of them. Today, all these districts have their own independent dashboards, meaning thereby they, as just now pointed out, that although we have national data systems and national repositories, still the data which is being collected or which is being analyzed at a district level is on an Excel sheet. It is quite true, but that particular thing we have absorbed, and we have given the individual dashboards to all the aspirational districts, while they can compare themselves, their values with the other districts of similar capacity, and at the same time they can have their own local database, local data, local values, and they can analyze and they can reuse that particular system and see to themselves where there is where it requires some improvement to be carried out, and in a focused way they are taking decisions. Say for example, how this data is helping them in an evidence-based policy. Just simple aspects. Say for example, you have SAM children, you have MAM children, and each of these districts and the district magistrates are closely monitoring their progress. And as a best practice, majority of the district magistrates have adopted many of their children. Once district magistrates started adopting those children and providing them all the required nutrients and other things and closely following up them, that has become a very encouraging model even to the other officials within the districts and across the districts also. This has become very popular as a best practice. So what is ultimately happening is that, yes, in this particular template, we need to, if we want the decentralized use of data at subnational and local levels, what we need to do is to empower the first district administration, ensure that the frequent movement of resources will not take place, ensure that the young and energetic officers are posted there, ensure that we provide the necessary technology toolkits to them, and also ensure to enhance their capacity building, not just merely having some national level or regional level workshop or a training program now and then just watch them how they are performing. Instead, we need to have bilingual self-paced learning module kind of situations, wherein if somebody, suppose for example, in most of the districts, it is the district information officer who is in charge of the data for the aspirational districts, and so in the event of he getting transferred, the new incumbent should also, by just getting through these videos, he can simply take the work forward. So these are certain things which we would like to, we have gained the experience, and especially another important aspect which I would like to highlight here is about the data quality. Okay, so the aspirational district was the first aspirational district was the first program at a national level wherein we have engaged the most remotest backward districts into the program, and at a time in a single repository we were collecting data across 6 thematic areas. So this was a great challenge, and we have somehow overcome this challenge by the tools and the methodologies which I have just now enumerated. And today, in the remotest corner of the country, the lowest level officer sitting in a district exactly know what are the key critical indicators that are to be taken care and improved for overall improvement of the district, and the district to join in the mainstream of the country across health, nutrition, education, financial inclusion, skill development, and even agriculture, water resource, and basic infrastructure. So this kind of capacity building is very much required, and I would like to take any questions in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kamaraju. I think it's a fact that the aspirational districts program is the first of its kind, which has tried to, bring in this regular information into the information collection, tracking into the way the program is designed and rolled out. And I think the whole country is watching and keen to see how this over time, brings about a kind of a behavior change and a cultural change also across the board. So thank you so much for sharing these insights into how it's being done, on the ground. And I think with this, we have now covered some segment of how the central government is doing this through the Smart Cities mission, the state picture as outlined by Dr. Girija, and a mix of center and district by Mr. Kamaraju. I'll now invite Mr. Viraj Tyagi, who leads the e-Governments Foundation, to give us the urban local body perspective. E-Governments Foundation, very interestingly, is a tech company which runs and designs ERP systems which are used by various urban local bodies. A lot of those platform learnings are being now also used in the health domain, and they're structured as a foundation. They're doing a lot of work with both the center and with the cities themselves. So would invite Mr. Viraj Tyagi. Can you, Viraj, outline a little bit about, in developing these data systems and encouraging adoption among government partners? What have been some of these efforts to systematically build capacity, and what more needs to be done if one is looking at better tech adoption for decentralized and local data use?
You're breaking up. Yeah, sorry, missed the last.
Yeah,
Can you
am
hear
I
me?
audible now?
I can hear you now.
Am I
yes.
audible now?
Yeah, absolutely. I can hear you. Yeah. No, first of all, thank you. It's a fascinating conversation hearing Girija ji, Rahul, and Mr. Kamaraju talk about various, and I think one thing stayed with me. Girija ji talked about how, the data base or data structure that they had in the state kept kind of getting whiplashed by what is needed at a central level. And I think one of the things is, I think one of the things we should think about is data bases per se is a very, very expensive ways of, because I think when you, and I see a lot of conversation on building golden databases and central databases. I think when you look at the principle of federation of data, the data should stay where it is generated. I think that's where the fidelity is highest. But what Rahul said was very interesting, that if you have standards and specs by which you can exchange data when it is needed by an actor in a particular format, then it doesn't matter whether you're on a SQL or you're on a COBOL database or whatever. You just need to make an ask for data, and data can be actually be consumed by the user. I think that's a very important construct that in this sector, otherwise we can never scale it. I'm telling you, it's such a frictional process. I can't tell you how many meetings I go to where people are just putting Excel sheets and getting data out there. The data is captured like 40 days ago, and then somebody's entering it in Excel, and then it's sent on WhatsApp or PDFs. So I think having this liquidity in the system and trusted ways of exchanging data is a very important thing. If you both need to create data at scale to be used by various actors, have this whole principle of federation. Because when you create centralized data, what Giri said was interesting, that people just see this data is for somebody else's use. Actually, that data should make that person more effective. We talk about database decision making. I am a sanitation officer in Guntur. I need to know where I need to go today. What is the feedback on me, right? And then the sanitation officer can see, okay, how well is my ward doing and all those things. But I think this principle of having what I call global transparency and local flexibility and local kind of agency on data is a very important principle if you solve it at scale. Now, coming back to your point about, how does, building capacity of the actors, I believe it is about making it easy. If you make the process hard, saying you need to enter this data here, then it goes here, then you need to, look at it at this. I think the principle we use is the data should be generated when action happens. I'm a sanitation officer. I need to go and handle a complaint on, garbage not being removed. I shouldn't have to enter any data. When I do my action, that data should be captured and be available to me and to the whole system in a particular way. So to me, having those kind of systems is the biggest kind of a driver of capacity, because there is no separate training you need for that. SMS comes to you with how many complaints you have today to solve, where you need to go today or tomorrow. If you're a sanitation officer, you see how many complaints you need to assign and stuff like that. That's one. Second is also what Girija said is very important, that people need to see value in their level of abstraction of the data. Whether I'm a policymaker sitting in Delhi versus I'm a sanitation worker who cleans septic tanks in a small town, right? So I think that's again important, and that brings to the question of how data should be consumed, right? We have to separate analytical data and operational data, and that comes to privacy. Sitting in state capital or Delhi, I don't need to know who did what. You just need to know how many of particular interactions happened. What were the outcomes, right? But if I am a district commissioner, I need to know which employee did what, because I need to manage the performance. So I think this whole idea of separating operational data and analytical data is an important construct that we should keep thinking about. I think third thing I want to say is the liquidity of data. I think we are generating a lot of data, whether it's digitally or whether it's surveys and everything. We need to think about, and that's where I love what Smart City Mission is doing. You're creating trusted ways through specification and standards, and giving some tools like IODX, India Urban Data Exchange, so that people can say, oh, I trust this data source. Oh, I need this data. I can request this data. So having those exchanges takes away the high cost of coordination that somebody writes from ministry to say, I need these data for how many street lights you have in your city, and then somebody puts that Excel and sends it back. I mean, look at this. So I think this liquidity of data is again a concept that we should think about. And finally, I'll just say one more thing, and I'll hand it back to you. I think through a combination of designing specifications based on needs, and through a combination of making sure that the data is fit for use, and making sure the distance between an event happening or an actor acting and the data capture reduces. That increases the fidelity of data, because a lot of time people don't trust the data. What Vijay was saying, if it's Excel entered, you say you can enter anything, right? How many people you vaccinated yesterday? It's your call. You can, but if the point of vaccination, that data is captured and it's immediately visible to everybody, why shouldn't it be visible to everybody, right? Then it becomes a public asset and a public good. I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thanks, Viraj. In fact, I completely agree that it's this whole thing about, what needs to be centralized, what needs to be decentralized, and to what extent can we have standards which make it simpler for people, on ground to use it. And I think you gave a very, very good example of what is important for the sanitation worker to, do their daily job. And if we can think about how transaction data itself can come into the system and be used to the maximum effect, then a lot of what we are doing with Anganwadi workers, school teachers, across sectors like health, education also, it can be more streamlined so that, we're not duplicating. I think, and now that we've heard from everybody, I also resonate with one of the things which Dr. Girija said at the outset about this fatigue around conversations where, we're talking about data, we're talking about systems, but still people are not using it. And I feel that. And, we're all trying to be positive and constructive about it, but knowing that it is complex and mired, and there are so many interests at stake and so much evolving technology that people don't understand. So I'm going to start with, a question and open it up a little bit to the panel, which is that in the story about decentralization, are there, what are some of the things that will help towards this conversation of using the data that has already come in? Because there are a lot of these technologies and tools which are already there. And many of us are making the case for better data coming in. But for the set that has already come in, and I will start with one question which has come in from our, audience on this, which is directed to Dr. Girija, that health data MIS has been collected for so many years, but largely programmatic decision making seems to be referring to survey data like the NFHS. Are there steps which can make the HMIS more robust? This question is from Satinder Pal Chahal and Hari Krishna Upadhyayala. Dr. Girija, would you like to take that for starters?
I think that's a very good question, and that I mentioned that, and this is the point that all these speakers have been now talking about, that because the surveys have a different way of going about it, and somehow the credibility of survey data is always given a higher value than the credibility of programmatic data. Now, why this has happened over time, and is it really so? For instance, our state has sometimes argued that the survey data can go off. Survey data can go off because of some kind of sampling errors, etc. But the correct answer to that is somehow in the past, the survey data, especially since they are done by NSSO or in the NFHS, they have been standardized to such an extent that we rely, or if they come out of the census, we go with those data more than programmatic data. How do we change this? This is why I said one of the things I realized when I was working with a PhD student was that even the indicators, or even, let's say, what we call denominators, are not sometimes the same. For instance, you use calendar year for some variables in one case, and in another case, you use a different seasonality. In health, it makes a very big difference. So we were unable to use data from one, compare the data from in programmatic data, and I think again speakers have referred to it, there is a tendency, because you know what you should be entering, or you, as I rightly said, it's meant for that higher god up there who's there trying to see whether you should get first rank or third rank, then you tend to put in. And I think Aparna has helped us do some analysis of big data analysis of some of our data, and we found that for the BP data, 110 by 70 and 120 by 80 accounted for 95% or something of the total data, which meant that the VHNs felt that this was the right answer, and they were entering it. So programmatic data, as Viraj rightly said, which does not come close enough or in a verifiable status with the actual action, which is entered later, tends to be guided by what they think is the right answer. And this is one reason why we don't, and we have also seen it. I was using it with my scholar for looking at antenatal coverage, and we found we had 100% in every district. So we hit a block. We didn't know what to do. So and then she did it for Chhattisgarh, which is her native state, and she found it was 100% there also. After that, we said, okay, we give the programmatic data a break, and we decide what to do with this data. So the reason why programmatic data has not been used is the validation efforts have not been, and this has not been, like he said, put it in, use it. If I put it in and have to use it, somebody else would find out. I did not tell, I don't want to use too much of time. There was a small success story in Tamil Nadu in 1999 itself. Danida helped us to do a machine learning, a machine reader, an optical machine reader sheet for each PHC. Now, this was a great success. We're still using it in some form, not in the same form. But the advantage was it used to go back on the same day to the field as it did to the policy, to the above. That is, from the DPH office, it used to go above on the same day that it went down to the district collector as well as to the block medical officer. So if somebody had told a lie, the block medical officer clearly knew that this person was not doing 100%. So it would get corrected both by the VHN saying, oh no, that guy didn't do that or that lady didn't do that. So my answer to you for this is, currently the quality of programmatic data is not as good as we would like it to be, and therefore there is more of a tendency to use survey data. Over time, we should definitely try to bring the two together, also by involving each other, that is involving those in program in survey. That's the other thing that happens, though a lot of letters go saying survey is now going on and please help the NSSO guys. Ultimately, that is given short shrift. Unless there are crazy guys like us that love data, nobody will even read those letters. So the NSSO people, which are also our own statistics people, will go and do the survey, and later we'll just complain saying, this was wrong, that was wrong, they didn't get the right answer because they didn't do it right. So I just want to say that we do hope that the day will come and we'll be before a seminar where we will talk about how programmatic data has reached some level of comparability with survey data. Currently, it is not. Is that okay? Somebody else can answer that also. I think it would have the same reference in other places also.
Yes, yes. No, I think, Dr. Gija, absolutely. The fact is that I think Mr. Kamaraju will also completely agree that this dichotomy between survey data and administrative data and the continuous, even when one is reviewing, say, information around nutrition indication or toilet related information, there is this tendency where people try to feed in what they believe that the leadership may want to see. And I think I will, also refer back to a very interesting point, I think, which Mrs. Vinny Mahajan had made in the opening session about how do we make inconvenient truths palatable when, data is coming up, and how does one then build the change management story? Because I think from what all of you are also saying, that there is this capacity building change management story that has to happen down the lines, both at the leadership level on how they receive the information that comes to them, and right at the point of entry where people are feeling some kind of confidence that it is the real data that needs to come in, and being able to build their capacities around that. I'll move. There's another question which is a little related to this, which is that and this comes from Sonal Desai from the NCAER, that crowdsourced data and administrative data both face different challenges. Maybe Mr. Kamaraju, you may like to take this one about crowdsourced data suffering from bias, with the urban educated being more likely to go there, and local administration having this issue about what do they want to report depending on how what the leadership wants to see. So are there ways that we can better triangulate from these varied data sources?
Yeah, see, there is always a dichotomy between the administrative data, survey data. Now, the latest thing which has started with COVID was crowdsourcing data, okay? So fundamentally, I am a traditional and old school person, where I always rely upon the survey data. And according to me, surveys are the best mechanism if you want to really see dramatic development in any of the areas. So the administrative data, see, basically administrative data is a kind of a transactional thing which focuses on the governance aspects. Okay, today everybody wants administrative data at a click of the button on real-time basis. The purpose of that data, the checks and balances and the governance of that data is entirely a different thing. This has already been taken care, and there are various layers to ensure the data quality or the action to be taken on if some data quality issues are evolved there. Whereas if you look into the surveys data, they come they come from the other non-administrative aspects. See, these are all household surveys. So ultimately, what are we tracking in the administrative data? They are the citizen-centric services, right? Now, if they have been properly administered or reached, that particular input, we need to get it from surveys. That is why they are more robust, and they are people will always try to rely upon that. Now come to the point, the dichotomy between the crowdsourcing and the administrative data. See, administrative data, if it has to be taken into consideration, it follows certain channels of administration, and ultimately it is going to be submitted. So this particular channelization would definitely require some time. Whereas if it is a crowdsourcing data, I am not accountable at the end of the day to provide any kind of number. So if by crowdsourcing, if I am getting a number, you can't ask back or make anybody questionable on that. Whereas if something is coming from the administrative channel, it is questionable, it is accountable. Therefore, there will be definitely some kind of a time lag between both of them. So there are various purposes for which the administrative data we need to consider at times, the survey data we need to consider at times, and crowdsourcing data also we may take into consideration at some times. But it all depends on the situation and the objective of analysis, etc. So we can't just have one magic band and say that, oh, okay, let's go with only one particular set of things. But at the end of the day, I would like to just submit, even though not asked for or called for, that it's always better to do any kind of research analysis or interventions or evidence-based policy making based on the robust surveys, which India has a very good reputation, and we have an international quality assurance on any of the surveys which we undertake, though it may, whether it is NFHS, whether it is NSSO, whether it is PLFS, they are the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kamaraju. I think there are very interesting perspectives there on the kind of data that is available to us. I think we have many more questions, but in the interest of time, we're going to have to, I have many questions myself, but I'm going to hold my horse and take that up in perhaps one-on-one conversations. I think we'll use the time that we have to wrap up with, some perspectives from each of you. And Viraj, I'll probably ask you to go first on, what some closing points on what are ways in which we can think about scaling up and institutionalizing this disaggregated and decentralized data use.
Yeah, but I think a couple of things. One is obviously we need to really look at how you can, in an easy way, digitize some of the interactions which are happening on ground. I think I sometimes struggle with this administrative data versus service data as a dichotomy, because people are, and ultimately there is a government to citizen interaction. There might be citizen to civil society interactions, because it just doesn't stop at government. It should be also available to communities which are doing work in those particular things. That's first. I think second is really having these protocols and standards and policies which make exchange of data reliable and easy, because right now it's hard both ways. Whether it flows up or goes down, it is hard. So those are my two key points.
Thank you. Mr. Kamaraju, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so it's true that I agree with Dr. Viraj on this. So we at Niti Aayog or at the government level, we are coming out with certain systems like NDAP within Niti Aayog to have that kind of data aggregation and decentralization. Even MOSPI is coming out with the data monetization policy, so that the making availability of the data at a disaggregate level, even at the subnational level, will become easy. So all the concerns and challenges which have been addressed in respect of utility of data, availability of data at a certain with a certain precision and availability, yes, there are efforts that are being made within the government, and very soon I am sure that you would be absorbed with these kind of challenges which currently many of you are facing it. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, great. I think we have Rahul as well. I think Dr. Girija, would you like to come in?
I think I just like to endorse what all the speakers said. One, make the data collection less cumbersome. I think Rahul said this, Viraj said this, to some extent Mr. Kamaraj also said this, because the way the people should know why they are collecting the data, and they should know the use of the data. This will make the process of data collection a lot simpler. So I think that is from the viewpoint of an IT perspective. Second is his point that we must make this data exchange a lot easier, so that nobody needs to be desperate to collect all that data on that monthly data on that particular time, on that particular day, and say, oh, the portal is closed. You cannot now, you will now be this kind of attitude towards data needs to stop. Can we find a way where we fix, for instance, as I told you, that every single pregnant woman's data is now with the central government and the state government? And I don't think they all need that. The person who needs that is the doctor at the ground level and the VHN. So it's not just service data and analytical data. It is who uses this data. Where can we save it, so that people, the worry is towards manipulation of data. But what we are achieving instead is a large monolithic not getting used, and as rightly put by the person who asked the question, data whose credibility we don't have. So can we find a way of storing this data nearest? And last but not least, and what Aparna was saying, capacity building, understanding of why data and what data. And I think that will make, I don't think many people even know what data, what happens to the data they collect, or what data others around. So I would just stick with these 3 points, because I think the others have covered a lot of ground on. And I do hope, as Mr. Kamraj said, that we'll be able to meet in a different forum where all these sectors also open up to a more open data exchange. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Girija. Mr. Rahul, we were doing a closing round of questions where on, final closing thoughts on how do we look at scaling and institutionalizing decentralized data use. Any points that you'd like to close out with for the group?
I have missed most of the discussion. I'm really sorry due to parallel engagement, but yes, scaling up is, of course, it's a long way ahead. Now we are talking about 100 smart cities today, and they are all at different level of maturity. There are some cities which have probably, you can say, are more mature or much more data ready with regard to their data ecosystems. They are talking about things like AI. They are thinking of how to basically do machine learning and all that. Now, there are also cities which are at very nascent stage. I mean, they are city data officers, but they don't know what their role is, and even the definition of clean data or quality data. So all those challenges are there. the scaling up will happen in a gradual manner, but what is required right now, we talk about data being the new oil, but today it's really gold, and that's something which I say quite often, because gold has value, but it does not flow, and oil flows. So we need to convert data from gold to oil so that the data exchange takes place, that collaborative power of data is truly realized. And that's where this 3P strategy that we are trying to imbibe in our cities, and starting with building the right capacities with the right kind of people, getting the processes in place, and getting the right kind of enabling platforms so that everyone can leverage those platforms and come work together. And that's where the scale up story begins. And I guess it's beyond the 100 smart cities that we need to look at. We also need to understand that what is the capacity available today in a lot of these tier 2 and tier 3 cities. It's not like 100 smart cities, but we are also talking about 4,800 total urban local bodies. And when we are talking about data maturity and data ecosystem in these cities, then it would require a very different kind of approach. So probably I think Mr. Viraj must have talked about or touched upon how you need to create an enabling urban governance platform wherein people can adopt the building blocks through a much more of a stack approach. Create those horizontal layers, let these verticals all draw upon from that common horizontal. I think that is the way to scale up that we are really looking at.
Thank you so much. So I'll conclude, and it's been great hearing from the expert doers. I will not put them into a silo of expert. I'll call them expert doers who are actually living and breathing these issues every day. And I think some of the things to go back with is about simplification. How do we simplify what we are doing in the space? How do we communicate it better, right up as well as on the front lines? I would not call it up and down, because I think that has probably been our fallacy over the years, where we give more precedence to something which is up and something which is down. I would call it movement both ways, and especially for those who are the creators of the information and the community about whom that information is coming in, and making the exchange simpler. If one final point I would have to add, I would also add the leadership mindset towards these questions. How do we use the information is often driven by, okay, what is this dashboard going to tell me, which I can decide on tomorrow, which makes it a review conversation, and not so much a capacity building or a growth or a transformation conversation, which is where the whole fear factor around data comes. And I would definitely urge everybody from the MEL community who is part of this conversation today to do what they can to make these conversations more constructive. I think people will be more comfortable with decentralization as a concept if they are seeing it as something which is empowering, as something which gives them energy, rather than the fear and the pain that comes with a review, but something more constructive about growth and what's going to come next and how we are going to improve their own work every day. So thank you very much. With that, we will wrap up this session. Thank you very much for the DMEO and the JPAL team and Aparna for helping us curate this session and bring out the best from our eminent speakers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you.